Hi, Glocal citizens. It's Florence Adu, and I'm here with my guest for today, Cordie Aziz, who is the founder and executive director of Environment 360, which is a Accra-based NGO that focuses on circular economies and just basically delivering value everywhere and with everything that she touches. Cordie, thank you for being with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Great. So first, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be on this afternoon. So I think you've said my name twice, but I'll say it one time, Cordie Aziz.
Yeah.
And essentially what I do is I founded an NGO in 2014, and we actually were the originator or the creator of the first successful plastic recycling scheme in Accra. Since then, we've gone on to grow. So we create recycling programs for schools, for communities and corporations. Recently, we just launched the first Take Back Center of PET in Ghana. We're opening up the second one in Old Fadama in 2 weeks. And we really try to work with informal sector workers, mainly women and those that have been disenfranchised, to really help bring them into formal waste management and help them earn more income and improve their livelihood.
Cordie, just so our viewers, our listeners know, stands for
Plastic bottles, I think.
okay.
So it's a long scientific name. I would be lying if I said I'd memorized it by now. But essentially, they're the plastic bottles that we drink out of every day, which is probably one of sort of the hottest waste commodities in the world right now. And a large part of that is just because of its durability and its ability to be used in a lot of different ways. So for instance, polyester, which is a leading fabric, is actually made from recycled plastic bottles. So it has a very high demand in the market as of now.
So, Cordie, tell us a little bit more about your background and what inspired you. You being the first to do something like this in Accra, how did you get to that point?
So I think it's really interesting. They say life is really a journey and not a destination. I think my journey has shown that. I was actually born and raised in the U.S. My mother is from Mississippi. My father is Sierra Leonean Ghanaian. He's probably definitely more Sierra Leonean than Ghana. So we do have some cousins here. But my father himself essentially grew up in Sierra Leone. Growing up, my father was always very pro-African, and I think that probably rubbed off on me somewhere along the way. So I remember even when I was a small child, I never really saw myself living long term in the U.S. I always eventually felt I would move to the continent, but I probably thought I'd probably be like in my 50s or 60s. So like I would have started a family, sort of had life going and then up and relocating. Just so happened, so when I was 30, I was living and working in Washington, D.C. For the Committee on Homeland Security for the United States Congress. When the House switched from Democrat to Republic, I essentially lost my job. So I wandered around, thought about what to do, and then something just inside of me was like, hey, let's just move to Africa. So I was actually originally going to move to Sierra Leone because, of course, it's where we have stronger ties. But it just so happened I had made friends with the chancellor from the Ghanaian embassy. And he was like, Cordie, I think you should really check out Ghana. So I came, I visited. I was supposed to be here a week. I ended up staying 3 weeks. I went home in 90 days, sold off all my stuff, and then showed back up in the country with 3 suitcases and I guess a lot of optimism.
And that was how many years ago?
That was 8.5 years ago.
Okay, wow.
So almost a lifetime for some people.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, generally, yeah. Like you think about your college through, so the process of becoming a doctor, right? You're just, it's totally a whole lifetime. Wow. So what did you do when you first got here?
So I feel like I was really blessed. One thing I always recommend to people is that if you are really a member of the diaspora and you're looking at returning home or returning back to the continent, I think you need to have some level of financial stability, even before you consider it. Fortunately for me, I actually decided to cash out my retirement. So I actually had some income already here.
Sure.
So for me, I wasn't as pressed to find a job.
Okay.
So I have to be honest, my first probably year and a half, I just sort of piddled around. I got to know the culture. I got to know how things work. I tried one or two ventures, but I really didn't do anything very serious.
Sure.
I think, though, this is also part of the reason why I was able to successfully reside within the country. I think we get a lot of people from the diaspora that want to come to Ghana or return back home, but then after a year or so, 2 years max, they end up going back. And a large part of it is because they didn't come financially ready. So they came expecting to find a job or some opportunity. And I think that's really the wrong mindset when you're looking at moving abroad, particularly to the continent of Africa, because it's not nearly as easy as we think it is.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Even me, myself, I spent about 2 years coming and going, coming for a month, going back, coming for, 6 weeks, like that type of thing, so that I could understand what exactly the landscape is. Because you come here, and even in those times, I was just shocked at, okay, oh, that's how they do it here? Oh, okay. I have to really kind of reimagine what I imagined I would be doing. So that's great advice, because it's definitely not what you expect.
It's not. And I often think sometimes, like when we come, because we don't understand how things work on the local ground, we think we have all of these ideas that are new and original and gaps in what people are missing. But sometimes those ideas, people have already tried them and they failed. It's not the right time.
Right.
Or maybe they're just not interested in some of the things that we think are critical.
Right.
So I think that sometimes, like you said, either coming and going over a period of time and better understanding what the landscape is, or just saying, I'm going to come, but I know that I'm financially stable enough so that if I don't work for a year or two, it's okay for me.
Right. I think that's critical. That's a great piece of advice. So thinking about our next segment, which is why the where. And I think you kind of alluded to this in your introductory discussion, but how did you get to where you are in terms of the location that you chose, or maybe which part of Accra you're in, or like why exactly did you end up?
Yeah, I think it's been a whole movement. When I first came to Accra, I think that, so Accra for me was natural because Accra is very cosmopolitan. So I think what Accra really has to offer is that you get really the best of both worlds. Because yes, we are living on the continent, but yet at the same point in time, you're in a city that's sort of hip enough to do some of the things that maybe remind you of home. It's not hard to get hamburger, pizza, this type of stuff if you're feeling like this is the type of food you want to eat.
Right.
So it's more of an easier transition. Internet is good. You don't have issues with telecommunication. Lights at one point were an issue, but that's been settled out now for like a few years. But a lot of the challenges that you'll have in other rural areas, you didn't really have within Accra. I think I've actually worked my way around. I can say this, the longer I'm here, the more comfortable I am moving away from the city.
Right.
So when I first came, I had to stay in Cantonments, which is sort of like the upscale sort of part of Accra, very close to Osu, where the nightlife is. And then from Cantonments, I still was in the city. Nobody knew the place then, but it's called Chado. Now Chado is hot, like everybody's in Chado. It's right behind the trade fair.
Oh, okay, yes, exactly.
Now it's like the hot spot. But I was there before, like when
I remember, right?
Nobody wanted to come to Chado. So then I went to Chado, but once again, the roads were so horrible that and I didn't have a vehicle, and it was a struggle. And then from Chado, I was able to move to Roman Ridge, which is really more of the center of town. Roman Ridge also was very luxurious, shall I say, because I got a great deal on a small apartment, and this was during the height of Dumso, and because so many politicians actually lived in the area, we always had lights. So it's like people would suffer for like 12, 20 hours. My lights were always on.
Right. So let me just interrupt you right there. So Dumsor was a period in time, and that idea is on off, right? So it's locally we know it as, when lights go off, and that's just so
And
it's
this was the peak. It was like 12 hours off.
right.
12 hours
Right.
off.
There's rolling blackouts.
Yeah. And it was like, you felt like you never had lights when you like you would only come on during the day.
Sure. And you plan to be out because you knew exactly. Oh my goodness. It was a time.
So, and then from there, I went a little bit further to West Lagan. And then from West Lagan, I moved to a Chalet Beautreil.
Okay.
And then from a Chalet Beautreil, now I've gone to Dodoa, which is probably an hour and a half out from Accra.
Right. Exactly.
So it's interesting to me how even the longer I'm in Accra, I guess I'm a little bit more tired of Accra.
Exactly.
So I didn't seek out some of these same social experiences that I used to.
Sure.
And I find that I do enjoy being able to come into the city, but I do also enjoy the peace of being around mango trees and things being significantly cheaper.
Right.
And, there's no loud music or random churches next to you.
Sure. It's quiet life.
Yeah. So I think that it's been even interesting for me to watch how I've gone to feeling the need to be in the center of the city to really being okay with living outside of the city.
Right. That leads me to the next question or segment, which is our Glocal Speak question. So that's wanting us, so we just want you to tell us something that it's a word, a phrase, or a saying that's meaningful and really kind of adds value to your experience here.
The two I probably use the most are Chalet and Kwasia.
Okay, so tell us how you use them.
So I feel like Chalet can be used for anything. Sure, it's sort of a universal term for friend. Okay. So it can be used as excitement, like Chalet, hey, did you? Yeah. It can be used as a thing of acting like Chalet. You won't even believe. So
right.
I feel like it goes anywhere. And because I have a lot of road rage and other things, Kwasia, which is usually stupid, I feel like I guess quite frequently.
And Kwasia is tree.
Yes.
Kwasia is tree for stupid. Okay.
And particularly when you say it to a man, it's even a bigger insult coming from a woman.
Oh. Okay.
So like when you really say it to a man, like it really irritates him to the next level.
Sure.
So I do find that I use this.
And it adds value.
Quite frequently.
Yeah. Chalet, I like it. So that brings me to my next kind of point of question, because you are leading an organization and you are a woman, and particularly working with local people who have certain ideas about the roles that women should play and things like that. Tell us a little bit more in that context and more broadly, what exactly the work is that Environment 360 does and some of your accomplishments, because you've had really great ones. You've had a stellar year, and how being a woman leading an organization has influenced your life.
So I think this is actually a really good question, because as you mentioned, to be a female entrepreneur, I think in the world is difficult.
Sure.
I think being a female entrepreneur in Africa is doubly as difficult. And I think that being a woman in waste also makes it triple difficult. I think when you look at the global scale, there's probably about 2% of women that work in waste. Here in Accra, I'm one of two. So there's one other female-owned waste management company. And it has been a really interesting experience. I think one of the things I can say is that I do feel like being a woman actually helps me relate to our local stakeholders a lot better, particularly because we work with the informal sector. And these are typically people that don't have high level of education. So these are people that probably didn't even finish JHS or junior high school.
Sure.
They might have some basic level. Some of them don't have any basic level at all. They've been laborers or traders.
So you're saying when you say basic, they basically are not literate.
Basically, yeah. They can't read, they can't write. And I think that being a woman, I think, allows me to sort of have greater empathy and patience to actually work with some of them. I also feel like being a woman is really probably the reason that we have been successful, is because I tell people I'm more interested in sort of the social impact part than anything else. So yes, I do think creating the first recycling program, I do think being recognized globally as an expert in waste management, particularly in Africa, with the informal sector. I think all of these things are absolutely magnificent. The awards, great, but there's really nothing compared to actually being able to see someone being able to make a difference in their own life, and knowing that that difference is not only for them, but it's actually having a generational impact, right? So a lot of our women waste pickers actually use their money to pay for their kids to go to school. So if we weren't there, maybe their children wouldn't have access to an education, which is something they didn't have. So it's actually really breaking the cycle. I think there are a lot of challenges sometimes to being a woman entrepreneur, particularly because, as mentioned, in waste, there aren't a lot of women, but you always want to have great experts, but typically they're men. And sometimes there's always a little clash because people think they know better than you. And it's like I tell people, like I tell my employees, you know, you really have to get along with each other. I tell them I'm the one exception. I mean, if I don't like working with you, you can pretty much start counting your days. I'm the only one that has the luxury not to like someone I work with.
Sure.
The rest of you, like,
Yeah.
do not have this luxury.
Sure.
So, but I really, it has been a challenge, I think, particularly in working with younger men, or even middle-aged men that really just are not used to seeing women that are opinionated, that are maybe forceful, that don't back down as much. Waste is very political. And I mean, we've had to fight several battles.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that at some point in time, people are like, why is it this girl just won't shut up and go, oh, what?
Sure. So tell us more about that, how it is political.
So waste essentially, most of the contracts are given out by government agencies and local municipalities, which of course, I mean, are controlled by political parties and people that have their own interests. And I don't think this is just an African thing. I think this is global. Yeah. Typically the mafia is sort of the one that runs waste.
Exactly.
So you really have to have a certain amount of gumption, particularly doing what I'm doing, because I'm changing the whole status quo.
Sure.
So I tell private companies, I don't think you're going to be involved in the recycling sector. So I don't think you're going to come to a point where every residence has a segregated can and you deliver the service. It's not going to happen. And then for a lot of them, this is very scary or unusual because they understand the subsidies that typically come along with it. So you get someone like me who's like, no, let's use the informal sector and like, let's push it. Then it's a whole other ballgame. So I think that we really have to illustrate the fact that, you know, women can sort of be at the playing table. And that, I mean, you definitely have to be a little bit more aggressive. This probably the field I'm in, at least, is not one where you're really going to get ahead based on your sweetness.
Right. I can relate because in my U.S. life, I work in construction. So
this is it.
Entirely understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So the moment I feel you work in a male-dominated space, you have to be willing to go to war sometimes.
Sure.
Be it to protect your territory, just to show them that you deserve respect or that you're smart enough to be at the table.
Right.
But you definitely have to be able to draw the boundaries, protect your territory, and let them know that you're not going anywhere.
Right. Which is why you're here and thriving. Tell us a little bit more about some of your programs. I know you have some wonderful partnerships with Dannon.
Yeah, and Glocal system. So we have a variety of projects. Environment 360 is actually the implementing partner for a project called Picket, which is financed by the Known Ecosystem Fund and a private company here called Fan Milk. And essentially what it did is it launched the first waste picker-led sorting center in Accra. So we were actually able to work with the chief to donate some land to Environment 360. And then on that land, we were able to build a sorting center, which essentially services the immediate community and allows this area to bring in their recyclable waste and actually be paid for it. The waste pickers actually work together in a group. So they actually split the profits of the sorting center. Environment 360 provides the business development, the capacity training, as well as just does the overall support and supervision of the day-to-day running of the sorting center. It's also great because when you look at a lot of our projects as well, particularly this one, it's based in a coastal community. And you know, Marie Letter is a huge issue right now.
Beaches are
Exactly. So we also have another program with GIZ where we also work with informal sector workers in Jamestown and Old Fadama.
And GIZ is the German
Development Corporation.
right?
So they're financed under the business ministry, business economic ministry of Germany. But essentially what they come in as they provide money for pilot projects that really support. Fortunately, part of us, our strategy has always been to acquire certain infrastructure that can always be used in the future.
Sure, sustainability.
Exactly.
Right.
So you'll see that we just launched one collection center in Medina, not too far from our head office. And as mentioned, we'll be doing the second one in Old Fadama. We also have a very striving school program as well. So we work with about 15,000 children in about 63 schools here in Accra. Fortunately, we actually just got some funding from UNDP, and we'll actually be creating a teacher academy, which really equips teachers to better bring environmental education into the classroom. So we're developing a variety of educational tools, games, workbooks, curriculums that when teachers actually leave the academy, they'll actually be able to take into their school, and then they'll actually even be able to teach the other teachers there at the school how to use it. So the games and other things that you bring are not only necessarily for your classroom, but they're for your entire school.
Right.
So we're really more focused on scaling at this point. We opened up an office in Kumasi last year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So we'll be doing our second phase of expansion in Kumasi as well. So we've also developed a collection center there as well, where we essentially purchase plastics from. We'll continue to do that. And then hopefully in the near future, we should be able to expand into something a little bit larger, where we actually can sort of open up full scale collection of a variety of materials and really aggregate in our own space.
That's wonderful. I want to take a step back because you mentioned that a chief donated land. And so that project, the Picket program, is what I would describe as a quintessential public-private partnership. So you have your corporations, you have your chief. So just for our listeners, the way that land rights work, the chieftaincy basically has all of the land. So every tribe has a different chief that basically they are the controllers of the land. So anyone who's buying land in Ghana is buying land from a chief or a chieftaincy. So in this situation, the chief being a partner to improvement in the community, because we have some that are not. So this is a great boon and a model for other chiefs, has decided, okay, we have space and we want this to be something that empowers our overall community. So this is progressive in that regard too, because we don't have a lot of chiefs who are donating land for public use. It's mostly for the empowerment of their own pockets or, I mean, to some extent their communities, but this is groundbreaking in that sense, I would say. I wanted to also ask a little bit more about what happens with the waste that you pick or that you're collecting. Where does it go?
Yeah, we actually sell everything here locally now in the local market.
Great.
Fortunately, we've actually been blessed enough to really help support the build out of the plastic bottle purchasing market. When we first started collecting plastic bottles, Environment 360 was sort of the lone soldier. And the price was about 39 pesos, so let's say 5 cents. In the past,
is that per kilo? Per kilo. Okay.
In the past 3 to 4 years since we've actually been doing this, it's actually gone up to 1 CD, which is now about 20 cents per kilo. We've seen a huge jump in the market. Now, I think since people see established collection systems coming up, I think that people are more willing to actually enter the market. So we even anticipate that we are going to see buyers within the next year that even push it a little bit higher. And we might eventually even get up to about 50 cents per kilogram, which would be quite instrumental here and really have an impact on the informal sector, which is typically owned this particular practice.
Sure. So 50 cents is the equivalent of
about 250 pesos.
2 cities, right. So that's a more than 100% increase. So that's great.
Yeah.
Who are the buyers? Are they the bottlers?
Okay, so our private sector is starting to get on board. They have launched some initiatives. My concern with the private sector is that they seem to fragment the market. So they seem to empower a lot of different smaller players, which I think is great because they get to say that, oh, we are supporting so many people. But unfortunately, the market is not large enough for you to support that many micro players. So essentially all you're doing it's fighting them to fight against each other, right? So you're just making it harder for them to do collection in their area because maybe somebody worked, they had a competitive edge, and now you've come in to support everybody, all of their competitors with the exact same thing. For you, you might think it's a win-win situation, but the thing is, a lot of them are sort of locked because they don't have transportation, they don't have additional land. So even as you're empowering everybody, you're actually making it a little bit more difficult for them to make a livelihood because essentially in a real business world, sort of the strongest make it, right?
Right.
So it's not about just the fact that you're in it. It's about the fact that you have to be able to develop a business model that actually works.
Sure.
And it's very hard to do that as a private company when somebody comes along and starts offering you things to actually do collection or to actually further process. Then you get people that feel like since they have the machinery or since they have the support, they're just going to do it regardless, right? So it actually is really sort of fragmenting the market, and it's not really bringing the cohesion of the market together. Because ideally, some of these smaller firms should probably actually be joining hands with each other.
Right.
So they shouldn't really be competing with each other, right? You don't need 5 people in a 10-mile radius or a 30-mile radius. What I do think has worked really well is that we have had some people that are already involved in industry. So some people that are already involved in sort of the plastic industry here and making a plastic products. You see them being more interested in sourcing local material to help bring their costs down.
Right.
So you actually have some of your long-term manufacturers that have been in the business 50 and 60 years that are now have interest in actually purchasing the materials. You also have people that have lived abroad that have come back that sort of see the opportunity in it as well. They also have moved into processing. So it's only really processed, so it's probably maybe baled and flaked
I see. Got it.
but the actual like finished product is probably the PET or plastic bottles are still being shipped out to Germany, mainly India, Turkey. These are the main markets that you see the plastic bottles actually being shipped to.
Particularly from this region.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I see. I see. So what would you see as a solution? You kind of hinted at it. It seems similar to the agriculture market where you would just kind of create co-ops. Seems like what the solution would be. Is that
exactly? I think that this actually does work. Even in our informal sector groups, we try to create co-ops. It is a little bit more difficult with the informal sector because you'll find since they're not highly educated, it's hard to trust.
right?
But mind you, I feel like although this whole sector is informal, so even the people that are maybe the next level up, students, waste pickers that maybe have a little bit more business sense, they actually sometimes don't have great business sense. I often mention to people, Environment 360, we use recycling memberships to subsidize sort of our costs on this. And then, of course, because we're an NGO, we get program funding. But I see so many businesses popping up and me understanding the profit margin within the business. I actually don't know how they're sustaining because I don't understand how you put petrol in your vehicles, how you pay workers, how you have an office, how you keep the lights on. You're definitely running in debt, whether you know it or not.
Sure.
So some people might consider because they want to go sell their plastic bottles today, they got $4,000 down there. They're thinking, oh, we earned $4,000 down there today. But in real life, you're probably operating in debt. You just haven't realized it. And that's why I said I think that it would be better if private sector actually stepped out, really waited to see who some of the key players were in the market, and then really put more support. Because I think it's very easy to mobilize 4 or 5 tons of plastic bottles once a month. But the thing is, can you consistently mobilize that every single day?
Sure.
Right? That's the difference between somebody that's a formidable player and somebody that's just around sort of holding up the market, fragmenting, taking away materials from other people.
Sure. So this brings me to kind of a bit of a conundrum, which is you have this program in schools where you're trying to teach young people how to be more environmentally focused, and then you have your business. So at some point, you hope that you, on the education side, put yourself out of business, I would think. I guess the question is, I know it's a long way off, but how do you see Ghana in particular, or the region in particular, moving away from having so much waste? And have you seen any significant changes in how much waste we're producing and the time that you've been in this business?
Yeah, I think we have to be realistic. The only plastic we'll probably ever get rid of is single-use plastic, which are the carrier bags. Hard plastic, plastic bottles, these things aren't going anywhere.
Yeah,
If they are, it'll be long after I'm dead in the grave.
sure.
I don't think that it's a threat to really get away from those. So I still think that there's a good opportunity for a livelihood for informal sector waste workers to really be able to do that.
Sure.
I think one thing we do have to consider is that, yes, ideally we will live in a world that there's less waste, but I think that's also a whole human mindset. And I think that our culture, the way we are as humans, nothing about it really encourages minimalism. I think now you have a few groups that call themselves minimalists that really focus on the fact that it's okay to have one pair of jeans and one t-shirt. But in a world where everybody is validated by social media and who's looking cool and we don't have real connections with people, I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where there's less waste.
Right.
I think that there's something about the human ego that's just not set up to operate like that, because we definitely equate what we have materially with who we are as individuals. And I don't think this is a new phenomenon. I think that we I believe in God. So I think that even when you read the Bible,
Sure.
you see these same things going on where people were so
nature of
excited.
man.
This
Yeah.
is it. Where they were so excited they were put into a certain position, or that they had gathered so much money and wealth that a certain sense of arrogance came about them.
Right.
So I think once again, we as humans are predispositioned to really want more.
Right.
So I don't see it happening.
Sure.
Because even here, you'll see all Ghanaians complaining about it being dirty, but tell them not to take a plastic bag. They'll act like, oh, so which will I carry? Is it
Right. Right. How will people know I've gotten something?
Yeah. It's easier for me.
Sure.
Oh, I don't. Sure. I can't use another bag. They'll come up with 1,001 excuses, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we're just not wired to create less waste.
Sure.
The reason we actually have a school program is more to create loyalty, so that as you're coming out, you remember that it's Environment 360 that came to your school and did these things.
Sure.
So as our recycling programs grow and there's options for you to become a purchaser or a buyer.
Right. And that's your memberships, right?
Yeah. You remember that, oh, I remember I was part of this program.
Right.
You get a membership.
Sure. Which is business. That's smart business. I hear you. So that leads us to our next segment, which is the mindset hack. You kind of, mentioned mindset. So what is your favorite or innovative mindset hack that you can imagine or that you know of?
So for me, I think you have to move as everything is possible. I'm reading this book now called Discerning the Voice of God, and it really talks about how humans develop certain strongholds, which are anxiety, doubt, fear. I think that you don't overthink things, right? I think that if you want to be active, if you want to change things, if you want a new life, I think it requires a radical action. And I think that the longer you sit down and think about it and create a pros and cons list and look at all the things that could and couldn't go wrong, or you start seeking advice from others, I think this is actually where the downfall begins. I think people need to spend a little bit less time planning. That doesn't mean just make foolish decisions, but I think you need to be able to know when the iron is hot and to strike it. And I think that if you can successfully do that, then I think that you can radically shift your mind to be bold enough to really accomplish these things. But I think that if you want to make decisions only based on data and what you see and what others are telling you, then I think you'll probably miss out on some of the greatest opportunities that life will present to you.
Okay. So ultimately you're saying don't overthink, and be less risk averse.
This is it.
Really.
This is it.
Yeah.
It's like they say in the South, scared money don't make money.
Wow, Cordie, it's been great talking to you. I mean, this has been so insightful. I mean, we've worked together, particularly on children's programs. So I look forward to seeing more about that and maybe even collaborating in the future on that.
We still use that, actually.
I'm sure, of course. Yeah. Hopefully, the sponsorship gods will come through and give us more movement to produce more. So Cordie and I worked together on a superhero, an eco-hero, actually a group of eco-heroes, and it's Jocko and the Earth Defenders. We created a pilot called Malaria Madness. And so that was a program that we did together where we went into a school in Jamestown on World Malaria Day and launched the initiative. And really the kids
they loved it.
They really did.
Use around malaria. It's one of these short films.
Nice.
That we show.
Nice.
In the school. So it's still actually getting its use.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you'll see your YouTube clicks rise. Of course.
Yeah. And that started as a workbook.
This is it.
Yeah. So then we just evolved it into an animation, which, I think it was great. It's really, it's good to hear.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like you said, there'll be other opportunities to really expand it. But I think that this also shows the power of collaboration as well.
Exactly.
Out in the market.
Yep.
I think that that's really critical for your success. And particularly this part of the as well.
Yes.
You definitely have to be willing to collaborate.
Yes. Yes, that is the name of the game. That is for sure. So before we go, I want to get into just one question to ask you as last thoughts. You already mentioned what you're reading. So let me ask you, what are you watching these days?
This is interesting because I feel like I always half-heartedly watch TV. So I'm never
it could be social media, it could be films, anything.
Okay, so good question. As you know, I recently got married, so I'm probably watching my husband closely.
I love it.
Watching him.
Sure, which is
on track.
Exactly. I love it. That's wonderful.
I actually have made a resolution. I feel like I need to get back on the bandwagon with really being sort of keeping up more with trends, really seeing what's going on in this green space. One thing I can say, which I'm sure you can relate to as well, is sometimes you get so caught up in being the entrepreneur in the day-to-day running that like you sort of lose a piece of that professional development or personal development that you would get if you were working for someone else, because it never seems like there's enough time. Like there's always a problem to solve. There's always something new.
Yeah.
So this has actually been one of my things that I'm actually working on. I feel like it's definitely God telling me it's time because, as you know, I'm also expecting my first child. So I feel like this will probably be a shift in sort of how I use my time, how I use my attention, and really see how I can continually improve myself because I do think it's become a little stagnant. That's what I feel like being an entrepreneur. I feel like my mind is always on my business.
Right.
So even when I'm doing something, I'm really only half-hearted there, right? Like my full attention is never there because I'm sure about what needs to be done in the office tomorrow, who's called me, somebody that said something that pissed me off today, like the strategy I need to apply. Right? So everything I do is really sort of half-hearted because I probably spend so much time.
Oh, you mean outside of work, right? Yeah.
So starting at 360 is the 150% of my time.
Right.
Everything else is just like 10%. Like I'm watching TV, but I'm really like, so tomorrow I'm going to call this person.
Yeah, I feel you. So I'm glad to hear that because for me, work-life balance is so important. So that you are conscious that you want to take a step back and figure out how to invest in you. I love it. Like, I think that's great. And this is perfect timing for that. So any last words or thoughts as we sign off?
Well, I would just say for all my global citizens in the world, I think the world is ripe now. I think particularly if you're based in the U.S., this is the time to really start looking for other opportunities, breaking some of those strongholds that you might have about why you can't do it, why you can't relocate. I think that really, if you look at the opportunities that are existing in different parts of the world, I think that it's almost foolish not to take opportunity of some of them. So I think that I really want to encourage people to really sort of dig down, see what it is that you really want, follow some of the instincts and callings and directions of the universe, and really step into the calling. We've got another 40 or 50 days, I think, of
The decade
year.
Yeah, this decade is going. Yeah, 40, 50 days. Yeah. And we're
So I think
2020.
this is really a good time to evaluate about what you're going to change, what you're going to do differently, and really not just think about locally.
Sure.
Really open it up and
Exactly.
see what's happening on a global aspect. Definitely the time is now. And if you don't strike, you're definitely going to miss it.
Thank you, Cordie. Very well said. This has been Glocal Citizens with Florence Adu, and this is the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset for those who want to do something in the world. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for joining us today. As always, you can catch us at www.glocal, that's with the C, citizenspod.com, and wherever you find podcasts. Thanks again. Bye for now.